Sometimes all it takes is a question to spark a conversation, and this one has been on my mind for a very long time. It has to do with our relationship with a watch, the loving, the hating, the acceptance over time. And it was a brilliant question sent in to me from Ed. Why do our initial, often strong, first and sometimes second impressions of a watch change over time? Brilliantly effective. And his example that he cites is the Rolex Explorer 39, where he says it went from something in his collection that he felt was boring to something that is classic, something that he feels is classic. And he then adds on by saying, is this simply a YouTube phenomena? You watch something enough and then you start to like it. Or is this change in feeling genuine? So thank you for this question, Ed. And if you have any questions you would like to ask me, my email should be on the screen now or in the description below. These kind of talking points really gets us thinking, and I reckon the comment section of this video is going to be much better than the content itself. Thank you, Ed, for this question. It's going to stir up a lot of conversation, I think. So the relationship that we have with a watch, after thinking about the question for a while, the answer that came to me, ironically, is time. It has to do with time. The time you spend with a watch can have both positive and negative effects on us. Now, of course, this really does plague the watch enthusiast more than anyone else, because most people own one watch and that's them. They don't need anything else. But with us, we jump to and fro in this hobby every single day. So it's very difficult to nail down the point we're trying to get to and to try and understand it and rationalize it ourselves. And the hardest thing of all to do, especially when we look at the YouTube platform, which is something we will address later, is to come up with your own decisions and to make up your own mind and your own choice about the object that you're looking at. If we are to go back to basic first principles with a watch, it has to be something that appeals to you. It has to leave an impression, and it should be a very strong impression, whether positive or negative. And I think in many ways, as watch owners, we should stick to our gut reactions when we see something. If something does stand out to you at first as a negative, you need to keep that in your mind. So time with a watch, time spent with a watch, important. The relationship you have with it pretty much sets a path to how the experience is going to last, how it's going to be. Like with anything that we buy, we need to find it appealing. There needs to be something attractive about it that brings us to it. Now, whether it has to do with its narrative, storytelling, branding, advertising, the background that it has linked to its past owner, say, all of these factors contribute to your emotional connection with it. As much as we would like to say that these things are just tools, just functional instruments, we do have emotional attachments with them. Sadly, most people need to be told how they should feel about the thing, because the community says it's great, therefore it must be great. But ask yourself the question of, does it actually suit me? And I feel like this does plague many people in this hobby, where you feel like you need to be accepted by the majority. You need to join this group of people who all feel the same way about the certain thing. Of course, there's positives and negatives to that too. There's a sense of community. We all want this sense of community with the passion that we share. But the idea of getting yourself into a brand, into a watch, just to please the majority and not yourself is the wrong path to take. Let's put it that way. At the end of this video, I will address one last point that I think sums up a lot of this experience. But to the next point, when we look at our impressions, first strong, maybe second impressions not so much, and then third we feel a lot better, I think it has to do with boredom. The issue with a watch that is so well designed or so applicable for any situation is sometimes it can be very sterile in appearance. Also, if you're wearing this watch every single day of the week on all occasions, of course, boredom would set in. And this is an issue that also plagues many of us here, where the capability of the watch is so good that we don't see it as merely a watch. We want something more. We want it to offer us something more. And because there's so much variety out there to look at, because we are seeing so many new things showed to us on this platform, it can also lead us along this frenzy of thinking about what we should look at next, and if this really is the end-all, be-all, or if there's something else out there. I want to address this point about the YouTube phenomena and this repeated viewing of seeing the same watch and constantly being reassured that it's very good allows you to suddenly get to this point where you feel like you should start liking it. I guess in part it has to do with we want assurance. We want some kind of assurance from somebody to tell us that we have spent our money wisely. We made the right decision. It's quite hilarious. I mean, we can't really treat this as a logical progression like we can in business, in finance, everything else. This is much more of a creative endeavor. It's art in the purest sense. We are appreciating the fidelity and the aesthetics of these objects, so it's very debatable. Not everyone is going to agree that a piece of artwork is a classic. Likewise with a watch. And again, it circles back to the question of how do you actually feel about the watch yourself? Is it something that truly impacts you and changes your impression? The experiment I normally do is, if I'm trying to come to terms with a watch, wear it solidly for 1 week. Wear it on your wrist all day, every day, for a week, maybe even 2 weeks. Along that time, you can come to terms with just how well it works, how well it influences your day-to-day life. Adding to the whole YouTube phenomena, this ability to see so much in such a short period of time, seeing such a variety of watches advertised to us, gives us this ability of choice, or mentally we feel like there is so much out there for us to look at. Why not branch into other directions? We've experienced this one thing. Maybe it's not something that lived up to the reputation that it has built over its time, but there's 50 other watches to look at. In part, this may have to do with the boredom that we have with the watch itself. But the thing about watch collecting is it's not a monogamous relationship. It's something very widespread. And it's something we should enjoy. It's what makes this hobby so dynamic and engaging. It constantly pulls us back for more and more often than not reignites the spark. But in answering this question, this last point I think sums up a lot of our experiences where our initial impressions, either strong, positive or strongly negative, in the end it is down to acceptance or lack of acceptance. The issue is that our ownership experience can be represented by a parabola, up and down, ebb and flow. And at a point, there is a time when we have to make a decision of whether or not we accept the watch for what it is, or we don't accept it because it deserves to be a lot more. And this is when your individuality needs to shine. When you can take a step forward and say, no, I don't like it. As much as it's a very popular model, it's something that doesn't speak to me. Or it didn't. It never did as much as I hoped it would. I guess our impressions of a watch can be largely manipulated by what we see on a platform like YouTube, especially the repetition. As much as your first opinion may be very strong in the opposite direction, seeing the watch often enough, you might find something about it that you like, or you might just accept that it is the way it is and you can't change it. I didn't expect this talk to be oriented around the character of the watch owner themselves, but I think that largely is the role that you play. Your feelings on a watch should not necessarily be guided or manipulated by what we see on this platform. It can be very difficult to find an original opinion or to come up with something that you feel makes the watch all the more astounding for yourself. But the end result is, I believe, that if it truly does speak to you, and it always has spoken to you, then nothing will change your opinion.